Hello, my name is Gabriela Mendoza. My candidate number is 6339 and my center number is UX633. Today, I will be going over the behind the scenes of the 26th edition of the York magazine. I'm very excited to share this project because my goal was to create a magazine that not only felt like a vintage artifact, but I also feel like a bridge between the glamour of the past and the clean girl aesthetic that we see today in the 21st century. So over the next 8 minutes, I'm going to be walking you through my creative process from my sketches on my iPad all the way to my polished magazine that we now see today. I'll be answering 4 questions that explore how I use media conventions to represent social groups, how I engage my target audience, how my production skills developed, and how I integrated the use of hardware and software to bring York Beauty magazine to life. Now, one of the biggest choices I made was to do hand-drawn illustrations instead of simply taking a regular photograph of a person. If we look back at these magazines from the 1950s of Vogue, they mainly used sketches because it felt more like fine art instead of taking a picture of someone. And I wanted my magazine to feel like a piece of art. However, I did break some conventions by not following the exact layouts and colors and text of magazines how they looked back then, because magazines back then, the covers were super crowded with headlines and text everywhere, like you can see from these examples where it's very colorful, it has multiple different colors and different texts and styles, and I didn't follow that. I decided to go for a more modern and clean and simple look, and I used a lot of white space, something that we can see here. I left gaps of white space to bridge the gap between the 1950s style and the clean aesthetic that we see on social media today. Now, when talking about representations, which means who this magazine is for and how are they shown, York was created to represent women who are tired of fast fashion trends that change every 5 seconds. My magazine was targeted to represent a group of women who value slow beauty and want to take their time to feel elegant and put together. My tagline here is elegance for every woman, and I'm representing a beauty that is calm and dignified instead of showing women in a hypersexualized way that a lot of modern media does today. I wanted to show that a modern woman can find power in doing small things, like even following a simple body routine at home to enhance their natural beauty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to York Beauty Hour. I'm your host, Gabriela Mendoza, and tonight we'll be talking about the brand new sensation coming to you, the York Magazine 26th edition. Now, many of you have asked me, Gabriela, how does a magazine actually talk to its readers? Well, folks, it all comes down to engagement. At York, we don't want you to just sit there and flip pages. We want you to also be part of the magic. And this is what we call making the reader an active audience. If you turn to page 26, you will find a powder talk feature. There, we don't just tell you that body powder is elegant. We show you how to make it yourself in the comfort of your own home. We use something called direct address, which means we talk straight to you. We use friendly and helpful instructions like grab your cotton round and give the jar a nice shake, making the magazine feel like a personal beauty coach that's sitting right there with you. But that's not all. Don't forget about the Rosé Lip Balm advertisement on page 41. There, we engage our audience by using persuasive language. We call it the secret to soft lips and describe it as hydrating and chic. But the best part for our listeners that are on a budget, we've priced this product at exactly $8.25, meaning you can go out and buy it tomorrow. Now, you may be wondering, where can I find a copy of York? Well, we aren't just any tabloid you find at a grocery store. York is a niche boutique publication, and you'll find it tucked away in the most prestigious spots at high-end beauty stores or vintage boutiques in the city. But wait, don't tune out just yet. We know it's 2026, and to embrace the use of technology, we have created a multi-platform distribution strategy, meaning while you can hold our beautiful magazine in your hands, you can also find us on your digital devices. If you subscribe, you get a digital pass to see the behind-the-scenes sketches and even get phone wallpapers of our cover art. Thanks for tuning in to the York Beauty Hour. Remember to stay chic, everyone. When I first opened the Procreate program on my iPad, I really struggled with digital illustrations. If you look back to my early sketches here of the cover model on the screen, you can see that the lines were very shaky and the proportions were all wrong. I had to learn how to use my Apple Pencil properly, and I learned that I could press harder for thicker lines and lighter for elegant, thinner ones, which is what I wanted for my magazine. So by the time that I got to the Rosé Lip Balm on page 41, I learned how to do the digital shading. At first, my drawing looked very flat, but then after practicing how to blend colors, I was able to make it have more dimension and fit the style of my magazine. Another thing I learned was the power of white space. Before, I used to be very afraid of empty space because I thought it looked like I forgot to finish the page. But I learned that in luxury media magazines, the white space is used as a sign of a type of media that is from a higher class. So I started integrating it more and let the simple details just speak for themselves. That was probably a very hard move for me to learn, but it was very important and it was a skill that I picked up during the project. Another huge area of growth for me was figuring out my layout design. When I first made the draft for my table of contents, I basically just typed a list of words on a white page, and it looked like a grocery store list, not a high-end magazine at all. But because I had so many different ideas floating around in my head, I had to organize them, and every single time I tried to start a page, I would try to cram 5 different ideas onto one space, and it just looked very cluttered and unprofessional. The most difficult page in terms of layout was definitely the Powder Talk page because I knew I wanted to create steps, but I also wanted to have so many things that in the end it didn't look professional. That's when I had to organize it and clean it up just to having the 3-step system where I allowed it me to keep the York vibe while making the information very useful. I learned the importance of the small details and how they hold a layout together. So instead of just making everything big and loud, I used tiny details like this little box here that says the tip that I would suggest when doing this powder. And I learned that I needed to learn to keep what I wanted to keep, what to throw away, and where to put the pieces that remain to make the final product look like a cohesive and a professional magazine. The hardware and technology was a huge learning curve for me when it came to this project. I used an iPad and Apple Pencil, and this was the best choice that I could have made because without it, I wouldn't have been able to achieve that sketchy and hand-drawn look that I used for my illustrations. The Apple Pencil really helped me draw with different pressures, and a main example would be making the line for this model dress. It helped me make it look like a real fashion illustration instead of just like a typical sketch. Now for Procreate, layers were my best friend. If you don't know what that is, imagine if you drew a person on a piece of paper like we can see here from this model design, and let's say I wanted to change her dress or I wanted to add a little bit of more shading. So on this layer we can see here, if I add another layer 4, I can draw now over this, and because it's separate, it allows me to also erase it without actually messing up what's behind it because it's in a different layer and they are separated. So I use this for everything, and using it also meant that if I messed up on the shading specifically for the lip balm, I could erase it without accidentally deleting the whole design. And it gave me the freedom to experiment with different colors or change the product overall. I also learned how to use the layer's opacity to make certain looks look softer than others and create more water-like finish, which really helped with my vintage aesthetic design that I wanted to do. So that is what I achieved with this drawing. Especially here you can see that these colors, they all look like kind of watercolor, and it kind of helped me shade, and this has like the lighter versions of that color to add that gradient effect. I then transferred everything onto Canva. So I transferred my designs, and then that's where I just used Canva as a way to structure my magazine. So this is where I made sure my margins were even, and I added the title, subheadings, and then I added like the small details like the barcode, and then I also added these little designs as well, and I was able to change the fonts and add those finishing touches to make it look like a real magazine.